Get off the sideline. Time to get in the game.
We are in some crazy times right now, guys. We are in some crazy times. As you guys all know, the world is basically shut down. The world has taken a break, taken a hiatus, and we all know why, right? There's this issue of the coronavirus, COVID-19. And if you guys have been following me on social media, if you guys are in my courses, if you guys are in the Wellness Academy tribe, you guys already know that I've been talking about this a lot. And it's been a little moment since I've done a podcast. I kind of took a little hiatus from this. Takes a lot of work to put these episodes out. But I see the importance of why we needed this information to get out there. And I wanted to do this episode to discuss a lot of the things that I know and a lot of the information that I've been gathering from various sources outside of what's been propagated in the mainstream media. So that's why I'm doing this episode. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, my name is Dr. Mike Okouchi. I'm a holistic chiropractic physician, and I'm floored by what's going on. We haven't seen something of this magnitude, actually, for many people that are alive right now. We have not seen this type of issue going on worldwide. And I wanted to do this episode to kind of dispel some of the myths that's been propagated on mainstream media and social media, give you guys a little bit more of an insight on, some of the truths. And, well, what do we do about this, right? That's what everybody wants to know. Okay, we understand. We know something's going on. We want to know a little bit about it because there's so much misinformation about that. And then we want to know, obviously, what it is to do. So that's what we want. We're going to shoot to accomplish on this podcast episode. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer on this. One, we don't have all the information upon what's going on. Two, a lot of the information that I've gathered is, in my opinion, only the tip of the iceberg. It's a big part of it, a big part of dispelling a lot of the smoke that's out there already. But in my opinion, it's nowhere near what the truthfulness of this entirety is. So I wanted to make that disclaimer. And, just from my limited knowledge from the information that I've gathered is what I'm going to be sharing with you. So please don't take this as an exhaustive be-all and end-all answer to all of this. This is just only what I know and from what I've gathered from a bunch of reputable sources, what I've seen from the research, which again, the research is so brand new because you got to figure we're in month 2.5, 3. And in the United States, it's fairly brand new on that. So that's what I wanted to preface that with. Now let's jump into some of the more academic stuff. What the virus is, who's more prone to that, all that stuff. We're going to jump into that right now. All right, let's look at what I call the pathophysiology of the virus. What does this virus do within your body? First of all, how does it get into your body? Some of the things that we know is that it's transmitted through coughing, through sneezing, and then it enters your body 3 major routes: your nose, your mouth, and also your eyes. So why is that important? Well, there's a lot of people saying, well, you can buy these masks and you will be kept safe. You've seen people buying out these masks and it's sold out everywhere, right? The thing of the matter is that it's transferring also through your eyes. So even though you got your nose and your mouth covered, it still can go through your eyes. And it attaches to the mucous membranes on the back of your throat. So yes, it does go into the back of your throat. And then what will happen from there is that the virus will attach to the outside of the cell, and then there's certain receptors on the cell that it likes. And you got to think of the receptor as like a lock, and the virus is the key to open that lock. So there's specific ones that it likes. Once it opens that, it enters the cell, and then it hijacks the cell. Now, these are what we call RNA viruses. And the virus will then insert the RNA into the cell, and then it'll use the cell's metabolic structure to make more copies of it. Right? So it's kind of like somebody breaking into your home, and then they know the key to they know the code to your home. They break in, and you got a copying machine in there, and what they do is they just make tons and tons of copies in your copying machine, and then they exhaust all the resources in your home, and then they move on to the next home. That's kind of like what's going on with viruses. Now, what happens in this case is that the immune system will mount an attack, creating inflammation, and then for a lot of people, the lungs will start to fill with fluid, and then this is what we call acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. Now, from what we're seeing is that the virus can actually remain viable on surfaces. So a lot of people are asking, well, is the virus be able to remain viable on my packages, on different surfaces? And yes, it is. I think cardboard was shown to make it, or it's viable on cardboard for like 24 hours, and on stainless steel, I think that one was the longest. I think that they were showing about 72 hours, and I read somewhere, I don't remember, but somebody said that they saw that the virus could be viable for about 9 days. So yes, it can remain viable on surfaces. Is it airborne? That's still controversial, because there's some reports that said yes, but many of them say no. So from what I have seen on the reports, we're leaning more towards the no side. But who knows? Is that set in stone? I don't think so. Now, what happens then from there is that it'll attach to the red blood cells, and it'll attack the iron within the red blood cells, and it has a high affinity to what we call glycoproteins. Now, some of the signs and symptoms, and this is what a lot of people want to know, because hey, if I have signs and symptoms, do I have it, right? And some of you have asked the questions, well, how do we know we have it? And if we do, what do we do from there? I'm going to answer all that kind of stuff at the end, towards the end. So some of the signs and symptoms of this would be coughing, headache, a sore throat, labored breathing, fever is another common one, joint pains, just feeling fatigued, run down, chills, rapid heart rate is another one. And then we start getting into the more pathological signs and symptoms of pneumonia, kidney failure, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And then it can also attack the heart and the kidneys. Now, these things grow exponentially. What does that mean? Well, if you understand exponential growth, you won't see so many cases in the beginning. Now, there's also an incubation period where the virus is going from one cell in your body and then going to many more cells, and then your body then becomes more symptomatic over time. So there's an exponential growth within your body, and then there's an exponential growth through society. Okay, so in the beginning, you won't see that many cases, and then it'll start to grow, and then it'll hit a point where it's infected a big amount of people, and there's no more places for it to go for infection, and then things start dying down because there's no more for it to propagate, or the community in and of itself has built up an immunity towards it. And that's the whole idea behind virology and the spread of it. Now, once it gets into your body, what happens is that your immune system doesn't like anything that's foreign to it, and it'll mount an attack. And the way that the immune system mounts an attack typically is an inflammatory response, right? So it'll either call up different cells, that's basically like the police, and saying, okay, hey guys, we have an intruder, call the police, and the police will go there and capture the intruder. Or it will take a biochemical approach and it'll just light everything on fire, create this chemical barrage. So what we're seeing with this is that it's creating this massive amounts of inflammation. So the virus particle will enter into the cell, and then the immune system will get a hold of it, and the body will mount an immunological response through inflammation. Now, the problem that we're seeing with this is what we call a cytokine storm. Okay. Now, a lot of you have asked questions. What is a cytokine storm? Now, that basically became popular when we started doing organ grafts or organ transplants. This is, everybody understands, like if you take if you put an organ into the body, these recipients need to be on these immune blockers because the body could reject that, right? The body doesn't like anything that's foreign to it. So it mounts this immune response. Now with the cytokine storm, what happens here is this process of inflammation is like over and beyond a normal inflammatory response. Okay. And what happens there is a local inflammation turns into this massive systemic inflammation. So let me paint this picture for you guys. All right. Say you have an intruder that comes into your home. It trips the alarm system. And then all of a sudden, that alarm goes all the way to the White House. And it triggers the nuclear missiles to launch. That's kind of what's happening in a cytokine storm when this is going on. Okay, that's an abnormal response, right? If an intruder enters into your home, you don't necessarily need nuclear warheads exploding on your home. And you can kind of get the visual on what happens if a nuclear bomb goes off in your home. What'll happen elsewhere? You get a lot of collateral damage. So with a cytokine storm, we're seeing massive amounts of collateral damage that's going on within the body. So there's a bunch of these cytokines that are being released, and it's primarily driven through what's called NF-kappa B. Okay, I'm gonna be talking about these scientific terms. Don't get caught up in it. You can look these things up, but don't get caught up in it. Okay, so there's basically there's two subsets that we want to focus on. One is called NF-kappa B. Just remember that this is the driver of inflammation. Okay, and inflammation isn't bad, by the way. You need inflammation, but in balance, so that you don't get all kinds of other stuff going on, right? Controlled inflammation. So NF-kappa B is the one that drives that. Now, the one that balances that all out is NRF2. Okay. So when these two are in balance, then you get a proper immunological response. Intruder comes in, the NF-kappa B pathway is activated, inflammation rises, you take care of that pathogen, and then it's calmed down through the NRF2 pathway, and everybody's happy. Now, what we're seeing in a lot of the cases that are being reported as fatalities are cases where this cytokine storm goes rampant and it's not being balanced out by the NRF2 pathway. And why does this happen? Well, when you look at the balance between NRF2 and NF-kappa B, that occurs through what we call the reduction oxidation principles in the body. Wait, what does that mean, right? And everybody's like, what the heck is reduction oxidation? Okay. That's basically the transfer of electrons. Okay. So if something is being reduced, it's an electron is being given. If something is being oxidized, an electron is being taken away. That's basically it. You just think of people giving something and taking something away. In a state of what we call high reduction oxidation potentials, that ability to give and receive electrons is balanced. In a state of low reduction, what happens is electrons are just being lost. Okay? It's just being leaked out. There's no receiving. Okay, so imagine that you have your bank account and there's no money flowing in. You got no income. Everything is just being spent and spent away. Eventually, you'll go bankrupt. That's kind of like what we're seeing here is in a state of low redox. We are getting these cases. This is when the body just can't keep up because there's not enough electrons for it to keep up with the demand. There's not enough energy being circulated here. Now, what will cause that? So if you look, if you guys have been following me, you guys know that I talk a lot about the reduction oxidation potentials in the body, and you got to view the body as a battery. Well, what throws all that off? What creates a low redox state? Stress is a big one. Stress, being exposed to toxins, all that kind of stuff. And I'm gonna get more into that on the strategies at the end of this, the strategies that you can use for that. But the big one that we're seeing here is diabetes is one of the issues that we're seeing, and then the other one being hypertension. And we're seeing this whole thing behind insulin affecting how the body's responding. Now, what's happening whenever you're in a state of hyperglycemia or you have a lot more blood glucose, NF-kappa B will increase. So inflammation will increase. And then NRF2 will be inhibited. Surprise, surprise. And you'll have decrease in detoxification. All of the stuff that you need to balance out will not be there. So that's kind of like what's happening in the cytokine storm here. And that's eventually it'll lead to sepsis and you'll have low blood pressure, hyper or hypothermia, you'll have thrombocytopenia, you'll have leukocytosis or leukopenia. This is the bad part. This is where we don't want it to go. Now, when we look at the numbers of cases that people have infections with COVID-19, we don't necessarily see a lot that goes to this stage because they need this other aspect to get to that stage, right? Remember, if your redox state is at a higher state, you most likely will not go into these stages because the body can bounce back, right? You have an intruder, you're able to respond, and then everything's fine. Okay? You start the inflammatory process, and then the body curbs the inflammatory process. For the select percentage, that small percentage of people that are not able to respond properly, this is what we're seeing issues with that. Okay, so anything that throws off the reduction oxidation potential in the body is going to be bad news. Okay, that's what I want you guys to take away from this. Now, one thing I want to point out that a lot of people don't necessarily understand is we are basically seeing the big issue behind the fight between Louis Pasteur and Antoine Béchamp. Not a lot of you guys know who Antoine Béchamp is. Well, maybe some of you guys don't even know who Louis Pasteur is. Well, Louis Pasteur is the one that is famous for essentially creating pasteurization. We all heard that term, right? Your milk is pasteurized. If you want to disinfect something, you pasteurize it. And that's just exposing it to high temperatures so that you're killing off all of these germs. As children, we were always educated that we are filled with germs and our environment is filled with germs and that these germs are very bad, right? So we have to wash our hands. We have to do all of these things that will prevent the spread of germs. So that was Louis Pasteur's hypothesis, was that the germ is what created the disease. Well, his contemporary of the day was Antoine Béchamp. And Antoine Béchamp came along and said, well, is it really just the germ, or is it the terrain that allows the germ to proliferate? So they would go at it. And eventually, Pasteur's germ theory is the one that became popularized, and the terrain theory just kind of took the back seat. And nobody really believed that, and that's what our basically the entire healthcare system is based upon, is the germ theory. That's what we talk about today, and that's why we have a lot of the issues that is being talked about on the news that we're seeing. And that's why a lot of people are actually living in fear because of the germ theory. We're looking at the virus as the problem. And there was a post that somebody put on, I think it was on my Facebook page, and they asked, well, is the virus the problem? And it's not necessarily the virus. It's the terrain that allows the virus to proliferate. Let's look at it this way. If it was just the virus, then anything that the virus touched would become pathological, right? Anything would be decimated by it, right? Like, if you're standing there and you got touched with the virus would immediately take you out. But why is it that only a small percentage will be affected by it? And why is it only a small percentage will succumb to it? Well, it's because of the terrain theory. Now, I also don't want you to take this and say it's only the terrain theory. It's both. It's really both. But what is primary between the two is the terrain theory. Okay? How do we know this is true? Well, all of us actually understand this in a different way. And how do we understand that? Well, preservatives. It's in our food. We use a refrigerator. We have canned goods. We have salting techniques that act as preservatives. And what this does is it changes the terrain, right? You can change the terrain by changing the temperature. You can change the terrain by changing the chemical composition, the pH of it. When I was in my microbiology class, we were given these things called unknowns. And what we had to do is we had to figure out what type of microbe it was by creating what's called selective growing media. And by using selective growing media, we could then rule out which of the microbes was not. Okay? We knew, okay, a gram positive would grow on this media, a gram negative would grow on this media. And then if it didn't grow on the media, we knew, okay, it couldn't be this, it couldn't be that, it has to be this one. And we did that through changing the terrain. So that's what happens in the body. If the body becomes hospitable to a pathogen, then the pathogen will proliferate. Case in point is that most of us have pathogenic growing microbes in our microbiome. It's only when the situations become favorable that those pathogens will become pathogenic. So why is this so important? Well, I talked about this earlier here. We see that there's a certain percentage of the population that has a state of low redox. And when you're in a state of low redox, you don't detoxify properly. And when you don't detoxify properly, that becomes breeding ground for any type of pathogenic organism. Low redox also means low levels of oxygen. Low levels of oxygen is a breeding ground for pathogen. And when pathogens within the body are already growing, now the immune system is in a state of suppression. A lot of people understand that a comorbidity with diabetes is gangrene. Why does that happen? Well, you get decrease in oxygen delivery, you get decrease in circulation, and then things become pathogenic. That's just what happens. Okay? So why do I point all this out? Well, a lot of people are just pointing the finger at the virus. The virus. But is it just the virus, or is it also the terrain? And that's going to come into play later on when I talk about some of the some of the things that we're seeing to be effective. Okay. Now let's look at, when we look at the word virus, what does a virus mean? It comes from the Latin word, a poisonous emanation. What is this poisonous emanation coming from? Right? That was always the question I had in my immunology classes. Where do these viruses come from? And are they alive? And technically they're not. They're not alive. They're basically just a protein coat with DNA or RNA in it. They're not alive. They need a host for it to replicate. Now, if you understand evolutionary biology, you understand that if something is trying to win more in life, it needs to take the highest road possible. What do I mean by that? Well, everybody knows the term survival of the fittest. Now, if you look at a virus, if a virus's sole idea in life was to infect somebody, to kill it, to infect the host and kill it, is that a favorable trait for survival? No, it's not. Because if it kills that host, it will also kill itself because it's dependent upon the host. Its whole job, its whole idea is to take as much from the host, use the host so that it can propagate itself, and then move on. Now, if the host cannot handle what's going on, that's the issue at hand. And that's what we're seeing, right? The majority of the cases that are fatal cases are the ones that have that lowered capacity to respond. Now, one of the other things I wanted to point out was that some of the research is showing that viral shedding can occur on average for about 20 days for survivors. That means that they can still spread these viral particles for about 20 days. They said about 37, 40 days was the longest that they've seen right now. So that means that even if a person becomes non-symptomatic, they can still pass along these viral particles. Something to think about there. Now, I want to jump into some of the things that we've been seeing in the news. And I'm going to start off with some of the good things that I've seen in the news. And there's a lot. I'm not going to talk about all of them. Some of the ones that just, they popped up into my mind and popped up on my feed. And I thought, hey, this is interesting. One of them was an article talking about the 5 myths to stop believing about COVID-19. All right. So myth number 1, you need a face mask. And I already talked about that. The face mask is not going to ensure 100% or block 100% of transmission because it can transfer through your eyes. And some of the studies have shown that it can actually transfer through the mask anyway. Because you guys got to understand, these things are very, very small. Very, very small. You know, a lot of us can't see bacteria. Actually, none of us can see bacteria with our naked eye. Now, if you look at it from that perspective, if we can't see bacteria because bacteria are so small, and then you understand that viruses are so small that if a bacteria, in the perspective of us, if the bacteria was like us looking down upon a virus, and the virus was the bacteria, it wouldn't be able to see it. That's how small these things are. I mean, we're talking submicroscopic, okay? So they'll pass through these masks. Pretty crazy, right? Myth number 2, getting COVID-19 means certain death. No, I already talked about that. It's only a certain subset. It's all about your redox state, okay? Myth number 3, you need to be near someone for at least 10 minutes to contract the virus. Nope, it can be instantaneous. Myth number 4, pets can transmit the disease. This has been a rumor being propagated, but a lot of studies show it's not being transmitted by animals currently. Now, we can talk about some of the ideas and some of the conspiracies surrounding the origin of it, where I've read research papers saying, that there's a connection to biological tampering in labs. I don't know 100%, But if you piece things together, it does seem kind of fishy. I've seen some reports saying that there was transmission of work that was done in the United States over to China, and then China was working on it, and China has a level 4 lab in Wuhan, all that kind of stuff. And I've read these things. Is it 100%? I don't know. I don't think so. But hey, who knows? I don't try to get stuck on that. The matter of the fact is that there is something going on, and what do we do about that, right? What do we do about that? That's the major focus that I want you guys to really look at, on not getting caught up in the other stuff. All right, myth number 5: COVID-19 is nothing compared to the flu. Well, yeah, a lot of people would say, well, this is just like another flu, or the flu is worse, and they're two different. They have two different genetics, and how the body's responding to it. That's the most important thing. So, the flu, children are being affected by flus. Whereas we're not seeing this so much in children. We're seeing it more in the adult population. We're seeing it more in males. We're seeing it more in people who have comorbid issues like diabetes, hypertension, anemia is another one. So yeah, I mean, we always try to compare something to what we know and what we're familiar with, so I can understand why people are comparing it to the flu. But when we get down to the section when we're talking about what's being used currently in the medical system for it, you'll see that they're actually using stuff that they use for the flu. So there's that. A lot of the news is talking about, well, we don't have enough test kits, and the United States is failing in its attempts or to deal with this because we're not testing a lot of people, and China has tested and South Korea has tested, all that stuff about it, right? Well, what they're finding is that a lot of the tests that are being done, they're showing a lot of false positives. And this goes for a lot of medical tests, by the way, not just this. So that's a big problem if they're testing and the information that they're getting back is not accurate. I don't know all the numbers surrounding that, but I know that there's a lot of false positives, and what that can do is that can throw numbers off, and that can throw, what the media talks about. It can create inflated numbers. I do know that there are a lot of reports coming from people within China that's saying that their numbers are underreported, and there are cases. Stuff like United States. I don't think the United States has tested enough people to give their numbers, and yada, yada, yada. Now, what does all that mean? Well, we always try to give these statistics surrounding breakouts like this, and we don't have the accurate information. So a lot of people think, well, it's the end of the world. We have, it's creating more deaths than flus or whatever. It's creating less deaths than flus. More people are dying here. Less people are dying here. It's creating a lot of misinformation. And I'm seeing that within the news. And I don't know if that's even a right thing to be doing, because I think that's just driving more fear into society. Another article that I read, let me see if I can find it here. It says, this one, it says, one strategy to treat the virus is weeks away. And what they've been doing is they've found that the lock that the virus enters into the cell is the angiotensin enzyme receptor in the body. So the angiotensin renin system is the interplay between the kidney and the heart, and it affects blood pressure. So in the cases of high blood pressure, what they give is ACE inhibitors, and these ACE inhibitors they're supposed to lower blood pressure. And what they find is that people that have hypertension have more of these ACE2 receptors, and that using a ACE inhibitor will block those receptors, which then blocks the viruses from entering the body. So that's one of the novel things that they're seeing. They've seen this with other cases of SARS, and the big one that I've seen in the news, which, I mean, come on, this was inevitable. When is the vaccine going to be coming out for it? And it says the corona vaccine trial. I don't know where they're going to start it. I think it was like in Seattle. I think I saw a video today where a lady was talking. I think she was in Seattle. She was talking about she's going to be part of the vaccine trial. And yeah, I mean, it was only a matter of time. Now, again, I say this time and time again, I'm not anti-vaccines. You know, if a vaccine will help the body to improve immunity, I'm all for it. But what I am against is any of the side effects that come along with it. And if the side effect was soreness, we can get by with that. But when the side effect becomes neurodegenerative issues, neuroinflammation, liver issues, all those kinds of things that we don't want, that's when I have an issue with it. Okay, so hey, if we can produce a vaccine that will not compromise the immune system, will not compromise the nervous system, I'm all for it. Let's do that. Okay. So with that said, as I'm watching this report, the girl, they start asking her about it, and she's like, yeah, you know, I love the vaccine, I love everything. And she goes, oh, you know, but the vaccine that we're going to be using, that I'm taking part in this trial, doesn't contain any of the unsafe viral particles or the virus. So it's completely safe. And the first thing that came into my mind is I'm thinking, so is she basically saying on national television that the ones that do contain an attenuated virus or a live active virus are unsafe? Is that what she's saying? Are people even picking up on that? I mean, you just look at her facial expression when she was saying that. I mean, she kind of she had this funny look about it. You can read people's expressions by their facial expressions, and you can tell what they're thinking about that. So that's what I'm getting at, guys. And I'm not saying that anything about a vaccine is the bad thing, or we're talking about all the other stuff that's surrounding that. Now, am I just blowing smoke here? No. I want you guys to go and rewind your minds and think back to swine flu. Okay. I don't know how many of you guys were alive at that time, but swine flu, that was a big thing. And I know a lot of people that were affected by it. I've treated a lot of patients that went through it. Now, the swine flu, they came out with a vaccine after that, and a lot of people jumped to it. And what happened? What happened after they started taking the swine flu? Well, there was an article that was written in 2014, and it said, brain damage UK victims of swine flu vaccine to get, what is that? I think it's like 60 million. I don't even know what that is. Like pounds, lira, I don't know. A lot of money in because they got injured by this. Now, guys, this is not just something that I read on the internet. I've actually treated people that have been injured by the flu vaccine. The swine flu vaccine, I should say. And they came down with all these neurological symptoms. Okay, let's see if I can read something here. Following the swine flu outbreak of 2009, about 60 million people, most of them children, received the vaccine. It was subsequently revealed that the vaccine, pandemrix, can cause narcolepsy and cataplexy in about 1 in 16,000 people, and many more are expected to come forward with symptoms. Across Europe, more than 800 children so far are known to have been made ill by the vaccine. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about with, okay, sure, we can create a vaccine that will help, and that's what we're looking for. But at the same time, are we going to create more injuries with this? Or are we going to create a different type of set of injuries? That's the one that I'm not okay with. So I hope that we can come up with something that will create immunological protection in the body without creating all the rest of the damage. And that goes for any type of infectious disease. Okay? That goes for any type of infectious disease. Now, let us move to what do we do about this, right? You guys, I gave you guys some basic information. Well, what do we do about this? All right. First thing we got to do is we got to stop with the fear. We got to stop with, oh my gosh, the world is ending. I understand what's going on with, all the travel restrictions, closing of the borders, quarantines, all that kind of stuff. In my opinion, that's the right way to go. Let's just chill out. It's a good thing, I mean, we live in this fast-paced world where we don't slow down anymore. We don't see our families anymore. So it's good. Let's just slow down. But you don't need to fear about it. Fear creates more stress in the body. And stress is the one thing that will really suppress your immune system. So let's stop with the fear. I see so many people, they message me every single day saying, what do I do? They're worried about that. They're just freaking out all over the world. So calm down, understand. And that's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to give you guys that information because if you understand these things more and you know what you can do about that, you don't have to worry about these things, okay? Washing of your hands this is all the stuff we learned in kindergarten. Wash your hands. Try to avoid touching your face, eyes, nose, mouth as much as possible. Clean your things. If you're going into public places, use your elbow or use your knuckles or, that kind of stuff. Just kind of simple stuff. Avoid touching public handrails and other things. Again, kindergarten stuff. Sequestering, containment, all that kind of stuff is going to help. Now, if you don't have to travel, don't travel, especially avoid cruises. And if you can work at home, work at home. It's a simple procedures, guys. Now, what are the lifestyle things? So there's general things that we can do. We just talked about. There's lifestyle things. Then we'll get into looking at the stuff that people ask me, which in my opinion are lower tiered things that you can be doing, like supplements and foods and all that kind of stuff. It starts with lifestyle, and the biggest thing being decreasing stress, increasing sleep, increasing sunlight exposure. Many of you guys have seen one thing that I posted, how they treated the Spanish flu 1918. Open air treatment. They got these patients outdoors into the sunlight. A lot of people don't understand that whole process. Well, what is it doing? It's increasing your redox state, increasing your body's ability to get more electrons because you got electrons leaking out of your body. Stuff like intermittent fasting, getting good nutrients into your body, so meaning a good diet. Infrared saunas will help. Again, we're not talking about curing the virus. We're talking about increasing your body's capacity. Okay, we're talking about increasing your body's ability to function properly. One of the places that I want everybody to start is the gut. If you guys know me by now, you guys know I always tell you guys start with the gut, and specifically the gut microbiome. Right? We need to increase the gut microbiome diversity, and you can do simple things, outdoor living, get in the dirt, going back to the open air treatments, going back to the microbiome. We typically see a rise in these viral outbreaks during the winter months, during the months that's darker, that's colder. because a lot of people are living indoors. Their microbial diversity is decreasing. Their exposure to sun is decreasing, which means that vitamin D levels are low as well, which means that they don't get enough oxygen, which means they don't get enough sunlight. So they don't get enough UV, they don't get enough infrared. All these things relate back to your redox. For those of you who have gone through my Total Gut Restore program, you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys know what to do. If you haven't gone through it and you want to go through it, you can just go to tripleplayperformance.com/Total Gut Restore, capital T on total, capital G on gut, and capital R on restore. And you can go and look at that. And that's basically my protocol that I've used with every single patient to get them back on their feet. But it starts with the gut microbiome. And a lot of people don't believe. They're saying, Doc, come on. What the heck does the gut have to do with protecting the lungs? Everything. The majority of your immune system is housed in your gut. The response there is created and will propagate through the rest of the body. There's this thing called the gut-lung axis, where what happens in the gut affects the lungs. The lungs has its own microbiome, which is influenced by the gut. This is not stuff that I make up, by the way. This is all studied. This is all stuff that is taught in school. Everybody who knows about the human body understands that. Those who practice alternative medicine, like traditional Chinese medicine, know that the gut and the lung are related to each other. On the 5-element scale, they're both in the element of metal. So there's an intimate relationship between the gut and the lungs. We need to get that into balance. Other one, optimizing your sleep. But got to be getting a lot of sleep. A lot of times people are just not getting enough sleep. Here's the one that I wanted to get to in this whole thing. This is what I want to teach you guys. I talked about redox in the beginning. Easiest things to be doing. First, measure your HRV, your heart rate variability. A lot of you guys have devices that you guys wear on your wrist. It can measure HRV in your phone. Find a way to measure your HRV. I like to just use one of the polar chest straps. Just get one of those polar H straps. They're a chest strap. Strap that onto your chest and then link that to your mobile device, and you can use like Elite HRV or Nature Beat, and then you can track your heart rate variability. The more diverse your heart rate variability, the less stressed you are, because that's measuring your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The more stressed you are, the lower your heart rate variability. Your heart's just beating at one consistent thing. Again, we don't want it to be consistent beating, the difference between the beats. We want it to be variable. Variable means that you're less stressed. Lower variability means that you're stressed. When you're stressed, your immune system's suppressed. So measuring your HRV is a good thing. And a lot of times when you see a drop in your HRV, you are more susceptible to getting sick. This has been correlated. So if you see a drop in your HRV, you may be coming down with something. What else do you want to do? You want to improve your circadian rhythms to improve your redox. Utilizing infrared. So if you have an infrared panel, like one of the Juves or Gemba Red or I like Sauna Space. Infrared, by the way, infrared's free from the sun because the sun's like 50% infrared. So if you do have access to the sun, if you live on Earth, even when it's cloudy, by the way, I know a lot of you guys message me, oh, it's cloudy, it's rainy or whatever. If there's light coming in through the clouds, you are still getting some of the beneficial light. You may not be getting a lot of infrared, you may not be getting a lot of UV, but you're getting still more. And that's one of the best ways. Again, if you don't, or you can't, or you won't, you can get a panel. A lot of people are familiar with Juve red panels. I like Gemba Red and Sauna Space. Those are easy ways to get infrared into your body, or people have infrared saunas. Cold thermogenesis is another one, utilizing cold therapy. Diet, we're going to talk a little bit more of that later. Water is a big one because you don't want to be consuming water with fluoride in it. So we use the AquaTrue system, which is a tabletop reverse osmosis unit. Why do I like that? One, it's the cheapest reverse osmosis system that I've seen. They clean the water and purify the water really well. It's affordable and you don't need to do a lot of plumbing work. You just fill the tank up with water. A lot of people were like, whoa, what about the plastic? It contains this plastic that doesn't leach anything. It's the same type of plastic that they use in like the Vitamix and a lot of food grade things. I've only seen good things with it. I mean, there is issues where you got to fill up the water. So it does take some work with that. So far, I've liked that. Is it the best? Probably not. You know, there are other units you can use under the sink units. You can use all these other things. But in this day and age, there's so much fluoride within the water systems that, you know, it's creating a lot of issues in our body. And fluoride is an electrical blocker. It's one of the most electronegative elements. So basically, all that means is it's stealing electrons. In a low redox state, you don't want more electrons being stolen. You gotta keep as much electrons for yourself. All right, with that said, you want to lower your exposures to non-native EMF sources, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell phones, all that kind of stuff. That further reduces your redox state. There's been questions, well, you know, is this linked to 5G exposure? You know what? You'll never find any type of substantial reports that will say, yes, it is. You'll never find that. Now, is there a correlation? Yeah, there is a correlation. Is there science looking at that? Yeah. You know, I mean, if you look at what happens with non-native EMFs, you know, you got those voltage-gated calcium channel influence. You got correlations between the launch of 5G and then the spread of these things in the different pockets. But like I tell people, correlation doesn't equal to causation. I always err on the side of caution. Do I like 5G? Not really. I'm not a big fan of it just because of a lot of the reports that I've seen coming out of Europe. A lot of places in Europe banning 5G. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. Is there a conspiracy behind 5G? I don't think that there's a conspiracy, not that I widely know of. I mean, it's wide open, you know, I mean, it's right there. I've seen videos where trees are dying with 5G. I've seen other things. EMFs as a whole, it's undisputable that of its deleterious effects upon the body. Now, with that said, we've been exposed to all types of EMFs, you know, as living organisms. We've been exposed to all types of EMFs, whether it's from geopathic stress, whether it's from solar stress, background radiation. Yeah, the sun is a big EMF thing in the sky. It's what it is. Overexposure of the sun has been shown to create a lot of UV damage. Absolutely. But you can't stay away from it. It's essential to the body. Those are native EMFs. These non-native EMFs have a different type of wave signature. Now, there's a book out called EMF'd by Dr. Mercola, which I think everybody should read. Such a great read. He really distinguishes all the things that's going on with it. I think there was another one, like the non-tinfoil guide to EMFs. That's another good one. Basically, guys, just try and limit your non-native EMF exposures. Like I said, everything is about electrons. You want to keep as much electrons, and the EMFs that we're being exposed to is just lowering all of that. And then the biggest one, stress reduction. So if you're in a state of fear, if you're freaking out over all this kind of stuff, you're creating a massive stress in your body. Chill out. Measure your HRV, do some breathing, go for a walk. Just chill, okay? Now, a lot of people are going to ask me, well, what foods do I eat? Eat good foods. Eat according to what's grown locally, what's in season. That's my best advice to you. Follow the Weston A. Price type of diet. Don't get all caught up in the other stuff. Now, with that said, I think it should be a balanced diet. I think that it should be a balanced diet that's best for you. And how do you figure that out? Well, you can either do lab testing or you can do an elimination diet and figure out which foods work with your body and what doesn't. Very, very simple. But go read the book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, where he talks about his study over the entire world. That's one of the, in my opinion, one of the best nutritional books ever written, because it's not done in a lab. It's not done on animals. It's done on humans. And it just looked at what were they eating? Did they perform well? Absolutely. Did they not perform well? Well, why? Oh, because they introduced a westernized type diet. Very, very simple. So go read that book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. What are some of the nutrients that we can be using? Okay, so here's my top 3 or 4. Vitamin D3 is the top one. You should be getting that from the sun primarily, and then you can get that from food and then supplementation. So sun, food, and then supplementation. And then the next one is liposomal vitamin C. I like the ones from Quicksilver Scientific. If you don't have an account with me on FullScript, go and set up your account, tripleplayperformance.com/FullScript. FullScript. and then you can set up your account, and then you can go and look at the different things. I like I said, Quicksilver Scientific, the liposomal vitamin C with arlopoic acid. You're going to take about 4 teaspoons daily. And then there's another one by Life Extension, the zinc lozenges. So those are the top 3 that I like. And then also molecular hydrogen, which activates the NRF2 pathway. That's a really big one. That, if you know me, I talk about molecular hydrogen a lot. Let's move on to the natural antivirals. So there's a lot of talk about, well, what do I use as far as antivirals? My top one is medicinal mushrooms. So there's the 10 mushroom blend by Four Sigmatic. I like that. Or if you just want to get one of them out of the 10, I would look at either reishi, because that helps to lower your stress. Chaga is another one. Those are my top ones for medicinal mushroom, which contains beta glucans, which helps support the immune system. Thieves oil, there are a bunch of companies. I know Young Living has thieves oil. doTERRA sells On Guard. You can make the thieves oil blend by taking clove, cinnamon, eucalyptus, lemon, and rosemary. We use that a lot in my office, in our house. These are my top antivirals. There was a question about elderberry and echinacea, and the common stuff that people were taking. There's a lot of controversy surrounding that, because from the research that I've read and what's been shown is that elderberry, echinacea, that can actually increase a cytokine storm if it's going on. Would I not take it? For the average person, I wouldn't say that it's detrimental for the average person. Now, if you have the things that I talked about, if your redox state is low, you got stuff like diabetes going on, hypertension, you got cancer going on, I don't know if I would be going the elderberry route, just because of that issue with the cytokine storm. So something to think about there. What are the common medications that they're using? I'm going to answer one of the questions that a lot of you guys have been asking. What happens in the event that you do become symptomatic and you get tested and then you do test positive? What do you do then? Well, there's a bunch of different medications that they're using. And again, I'm not against medication, because in these times, if you're in an acute reaction, you may need a medication. And in my opinion, this is a time when medications will work the best, because we have a lot of the antivirals on the market that actually show to be pretty effective. One of the ones, there's a whole bunch of them. One of the ones that they're using is chloroquine phosphate. Tamiflu they're actually using that a lot. And another one is, where is it? Let me look for it. Or tribavirin. So those are the most common ones that I've seen that they're utilizing. I think they've utilized that the most in China. In the United States and Europe, I think that they were using for Ebola, which is called remdesivir. And what remdesivir does is it blocks RNA transcription. So when the virus gets into the cell, it blocks how it can replicate itself. Another one that they're using is to block the virus from actually getting into the cell, would be an ACE inhibitor. So losartan is the one that they're currently using now. I don't know the effectiveness. They haven't really come out with a lot of the research showing the effectiveness of the other ACE inhibitors. Now, there are some actual natural ACE inhibitors. Bonito peptide, C12 peptide, hawthorn berry, and pomegranate juice are natural ACE inhibitors. They are also trying to use anti-malarial and anti-parasitic drugs. So those are the common ones that they'll be utilizing within a hospital setting. I've seen them use vitamin C IV drips for treatments. Those are some of the things that they're doing. Let me get to some of the questions you guys have asked. Let me just go down this list. If you catch the virus, then what should you do? So here's what I would do. If you catch it, hey, you know what? Go and see your physician, arm yourself with as much information as possible, and then utilize their information as possible, and then utilize the things that I've told you here. Like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is something that you can use as a foundational point, and then stack on some of the other information that you learn along the way. Another one is, what is community transmission? Okay, so there's two definitions of how infectious diseases spread. One is called a nosocomial, which is within like the hospital setting, within the, like a mode of transmission that you were around somebody that had the virus, that had the infection. That's how it gets transferred. Community is when there is no known seed of infection and you somehow got it. So basically outside of a hospital infectious setting, that's where it's coming from, but there's no real known source. So that's when things gets kind of scratching your head. Like, wait a minute. If you were never around a person that had the virus, then how did you get it? That's a question for another day. Is it worth the risk to go out and get fresh produce or stay in and eat frozen veggies and meals? Well, if you're in a place where they're reporting a lot of infection, I don't know if I would be going out. I always tell people you should be prepared, but in these cases, I don't know if I would be, just because there's a couple things. One, you never know what may be going on. And for me, I'm more concerned about co-infections than I am about what's going on currently. Okay. And that's what we're seeing a lot of, are these co-infections. Should you go to the doctor and get tested? Not really. Like I said, a lot of the tests are inconclusive or they're false positives. And I think that a lot of people, if a lot of people will actually show to be negative, they only hold the symptoms for like a common cold or like a seasonal flu. That's what most likely will be going on. Now, if you're having respiratory distress, all the telltale signs of it, then yes, please seek medical attention. But if you don't feel well, like, oh, I have a headache, I don't know. That's just my opinion. This is not medical advice, by the way. That's just my opinion. Healthiest non-perishables to stock up on. In times of quarantine, in times of emergencies, I don't know if there's that many things you can, we have MREs, we have all those emergency preparedness foods. They do make, gluten-free ones and all that kind of stuff. But when you're in that sense, I don't know if nutrients per se, eating according to a Weston A price type of thing is going to be the one thing, because your body's going to be, or society is going to be in survival mode. So how long do I think the quarantine will last? In my opinion, I think about 8 weeks. From what I've been reading, everything should pass through and it should be in the clear by about June 2020, if not July. That's if everything goes according to how it should be and just looking at the lifespan of it all. So about 8 weeks or so. Is it still okay to go outside and run? Yeah, why not? What about conceiving during this time and advice for pregnant moms? Let me start with the pregnant moms. I'd say just take the general precautions as with anything else, as like you would do during the flu season. Everything that I just told you, because everything comes back down to redox. Pregnancy will lower your redox, so making sure that you're being diligent on those things to help your body to stay in a high redox state will be very important for you. Is this virus more dangerous than other viruses, and why is the media blowing this up? That's a great question. Like I said before, it's not necessarily about the virus, but how the body's responding to it. This type of virus, it has a different type of genetic sequence in it. And there are a couple of different mutations than other types of coronavirus. That's why it's called a novel coronavirus. It's creating a different type of immune response. The immune response is the dangerous part. That's what we're seeing. Is the virus more dangerous? I don't think the virus is more dangerous. I think that it's, like I said, it's just creating that immune response in a selective group. Thank goodness it's not detrimental to a lot of the children. But again, if the children's immunocompromised, I've seen reports where there are some children that have lung issues like lung cancers and they're being affected by it. If the body is in a low redox state, that's when we're seeing it being more dangerous, because the body goes into that cytokine storm and then the body just can't respond from that. Why is the media blowing this up? I don't know. I really don't know. I think just because of the widespread of it all. I mean, the media always blows up any type of outbreaks with anything. I mean, you go back to the measles outbreak that happened in Southern California. I mean, I was in the midst of that. And, you had the measles outbreak in Samoa. All these other things, anytime you have these outbreaks, the media will always propagate it. Why does the media do these things? I mean, I have my ideas that I'll keep to myself. The media does its thing. I mean, it has to have something to report on, the biggest news. So that's their job. Next question is, does ibuprofen and NSAIDs worsen the symptoms? I've seen a lot more reports saying yes, it does worsen the symptoms. The answer to that would probably be yes. Next question is how to not buy into the media hype. Well, here's my opinion. Don't watch the media, don't listen to them, and or understand what they're trying to say. Take the information, but never get caught up in the emotion. That's my best advice. Is this a serious issue for those with autoimmune issues? Well, I haven't seen that many issues for autoimmune things, so I don't think so. What about traveling? In my opinion, I wouldn't be traveling right now just because, and the major issue is not necessarily for the virus itself. You know, you look at all those cruises, those people are trapped on the boat. You know, say you go somewhere and then they close on the borders. You can't get back. That's the biggest thing. I saw people in Chicago the other day, they're trying to get through customs and it's 4, 5, 6 hours to get through that. That's why I wouldn't recommend traveling. It's just inconvenient right now. Another question was, how are people in Hawaii handling this? You know, I mean, in Hawaii, people are just kind of chilling out. The school systems have extended the spring break. Kids are staying home. A lot of the businesses are just chilling out. But as a whole, there's not much of a fervor going on. And I mean, there were multiple reports. There was just another report this morning that I read that there was the first community infection out on the windward side. There were reports of people that were from the cruise ships coming in that had tested positive. But overall, I don't think, people in Hawaii are getting too crazy over this stuff. And even if there is a mass island shutdown, I don't think people in Hawaii would really care all so much. I mean, we'd all probably just hang out, do our thing. If you get the virus and recover, can you get it again? From what I've seen, yes. And from what I've seen in the past, yes. Oh, this was a really good question. If a vaccine does come out, as like I talked about earlier, is this something I would have recommended to my grandmother? And my answer would be no, just because of what I know and how people with immunocompromised nervous systems and low redox states would react to it. So now, with that said, like I said before, if the vaccine, I knew for a fact that it would not cause any type of deleterious effects on the body, I'm all for it. But in all honesty, we haven't seen that yet. We have not seen that yet. So those were the Q&As that you guys have asked on my Instagram. I just want to wrap all this up. I mean, this was a long one. Yeah, there's stuff going on. There's more to it than a lot of people understand. There's more to it than I understand. But what I wanted to do here, guys, is just the foundation. Just the foundation of it all. I wanted to make sure that you guys understand, because when you understand something, you don't have to fear it, or you don't have to fear it as much. There's a lot of fear mongering going on right now on the mainstream media. I wouldn't buy into that. I wouldn't succumb my family to all of that stuff. My biggest advice to you, listen to this, listen to it over again. If you have questions, message me on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can hit me up there, instagram.com/tripleplaydoc. I post something about all things health. Right now, we're talking about the biggest thing right now in society, COVID-19. I do Q&As every single Tuesday where I post up a question box on a Monday, and then you can ask a question. And if I can get to it, which there are thousands of questions every single week, I'll get to it on Tuesday afternoons. And a lot of people, if you guys just have questions, you guys can reach out to me through that medium. That's one of the best ways. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, I thank you guys for sticking around this long. I know this is a long one. You guys can go back and search through all the different other podcasts. Got so much information there. I've had some amazing guests in the past. Consider subscribing. I've been bugged by a lot of people to get back on the podcast. So yes, I will. I got a whole bunch of episodes that I didn't release in the past that I will release. And then I got a whole bunch of more things going on. So with that said, guys, stay safe, be kind to each other, don't freak out. This is Dr. Mike from Triple Play Performance Podcast saying be well and aloha.
Hey, if you've enjoyed this podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Connect with me on Instagram at tripleplaydoc. Stay tuned for more episodes. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell the entire world. Till the next episode, be well and aloha.